famously stayed at Walden Pond for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days between 1845 and 1847. About halfway during Thoreau's stay at the pond, he went to the Maine woods, his first trip to the Maine woods, and climbed Mount Katahdin, the highest peak in the state of Maine. And it's interesting to see what he has to say. He actually has quite a long passage about it, but what I'd like to do is just read what I regard as the most critical component of this long passage. Among Thoreau scholars, it's fairly well known as the contact passage, and you'll see why in a moment. I stand in awe of my body, he writes. This matter to which I am bound has become so strange to me. I fear not spirits, ghosts of which I am one, that my body might, but I fear bodies, I tremble to meet them. What is this Titan that has possession of me? Talk of mysteries, think of our life in nature, daily to be shown matter, to come in contact with it. Rock, trees, wind on our cheeks, the solid earth, the actual world, the common sense. Contact, who are we? Where are we? This is kind of, I think for Thoreau, this is kind of a seminal experience, an experience that you have out in the world that gets you down to some of the most foundational, fundamental questions that even involve who you are, questions of identity, epistemology. I mean, again, some of the most philosophically basic questions. He, in a sense, lifts the veil from his perceptions and is able to have a kind of a direct relationship with the environment, and to see, as I put it in an introduction that I wrote for one of his later books, he's able to see the miraculous in the commonplace. And if you spend all your time in an office, I think it's very difficult to get this contact passage. I mean, you see where he just kind of breaks down rocks, trees, wind on our cheeks, solid earth, actual world, common sense, contact, who are we? This guy's lost it. From a kind of a linguistic point of view, he's lost it. But it's again, from my point of view, it's how do you push the envelope of your consciousness? How do you use language if you're a poet? How do you use language to make people understand, what does Carlos Castaneda call it? Something reality, a different reality, a separate reality. Yeah, how do you do that? If you really are a prophet, how do you do that? What is the prophetic language? How do you use prophetic language? You have Moses on top of Mount Sinai, basically, being able to look at the Holy Land, those sorts of things. But on Mount Sinai, Moses is up there and actually has, in the Jewish myth and Jewish Judeo-Christian tradition, actually speaks with God, experiences and communicates with the divine. And that's what's going on, I think, with Thoreau. He's tapping into that. He's trying to use the same, he's trying to use that tradition to deepen the flow of his own narrative. In other words, you have Thoreau on Mount Katahdin, you have Moses on Mount Sinai. There's a correspondence between the two, and Thoreau is attempting to leverage that correspondence to basically make his own essay a scripture. What Thoreau's doing here in Katahdin, I think, and frankly in a lot of his best writing, is he's trying to tap into this whole experience that you could call the prophetic tradition. In the prophetic tradition, at least from a Judeo-Christian point of view, you have the prophet who is a part of civilization and separates himself or herself from civilization, goes out into the wilderness, and in the Judeo-Christian tradition for 40 days and 40 nights into the wilderness and eats locusts and honey, and then comes back. But while they're in the wilderness, they have this kind of a foundational experience, and they're able to see through the appearance of things to the reality and bring that spiritual truth back into the human community and tell people in that community what's real as opposed to what appears to be. That what we all take to be commonplace, something like a wafer of bread and a little bit of wine. They're very commonplace things, but if they're imbued with a different vision, they become purely sacramental, miraculous to these people who, in certain religious traditions. And what Thoreau, I think, says is that that particular insight, that these mundane things are at one moment mundane, but can be somehow transformed into miraculous perception. You just need to learn how to look at it somewhat differently, and it's transformed into something quite miraculous. And what Thoreau is doing in his later work, he wrote a book called Wild Fruits, which explores that entire sacramental tradition and leverages that insight from the Judeo-Christian and other traditions for his own transcendentalist, American transcendentalist purposes. But it's basically trying to take the insight that all nature is miraculous and bring it into contemporary American life.
Katahdin, you see nature behaving as nature should, whether it's gale force winds or whether it's a horrible snowstorm or a rock slide or a mudslide. That is nature doing what nature is supposed to do. It is neither good nor bad, nature just is. And I learned that by being at Katahdin, that I am part of that nature, and I should be as myself at all times, just as nature is herself.